Now, Young Thug began to dabble in rap publicly all the way back in 2010. One of his earliest appearances, featuring on True Royale's She Can Go, saw a young Thug showcasing an early style heavily influenced by Lil Wayne. And to begin with, music wasn't really a serious prospect for Young Thug. But in 2011, that perspective might have begun to change for Thug. This being the year of that big bust on the Raised on Cleveland crew. With the block hot and a number of young people from the area getting locked up, thankfully Thug was able to find a new route to success as he would begin to pick up steam musically. Over the course of 2011 and 2012, Thug would drop 3 installments of a mixtape series, I Came From Nothing 1, 2 and 3. Projects which featured extensive lyrics about Thug's tough come up around the rock crew on Cleveland Avenue. So Thug was beginning to make some waves in music, though in the early days he would struggle to distance himself from those many Lil Wayne comparisons. But eventually, Young Thug's hard work would pay off and he would pick up the attention of Atlanta trap legend Gucci Mane, who would sign Thug to his 1017 Brick Squad record label, with Gucci apparently signing Thug for 25 bands in cash without even hearing his music. But this gamble would pay off as Thug's profile would continue to rise, and Gucci would even collaborate with him numerous times on the 1017 Thug joint mixtape, as well as Gucci putting Thug on his 2013 single Breakdance. These moves would have Thug capturing the attention of the hip-hoposphere in a big way. He landed himself a 2013 Complex article which unfortunately opened with a massive paragraph comparing him to Lil Wayne, but in my opinion, it was around this time that Young Thug actually begun to find his own original style, moving away from the derivative flows that he had borrowed from Lil Wayne before. Also in that Complex article, we got an update on where Young Thug was as far as his connections to the streets, saying that since signing with 1017, he's spending less time with his original rock crew. And by 2017, we would stop hearing Young Thug referring to his old team, the rock crew, and beginning to refer to the people around him as a group by the name of YSL. But far from a label, Young Thug was still describing his YSL goons as the guys that will come and wipe your nose. From here, Young Thug would begin to shout out his YSL family on as many songs as he possibly could, even giving them a big shout out on his breakthrough single, Stoner. In fact, on that very song, there are lyrics that may have gone over a lot of people's heads, where Young Thug seems to basically explain the evolution of the rock crew to YSL, rapping, "Hear my song way from YTC," which is apparently Young Thug's in charge, ROB, which stands for Raised on Cleveland or Cleveland, SMM, Sex Money Murder, another blood set out of Atlanta, now we YSL Venom, which seems to suggest that Thug kind of came up through all these gang blood sort of sets. But that's in the past, and now he's YSL, baby. He goes on to shout out a number of people, referring to them as his slimes, followed by the slat ad-lib. And really, if you ask me, the track Stoner is basically the point where Young Thug began to heavily rep YSL in his music and just in general. This is where the movement began. And it also just so happens that this is the point where Young Thug's career began to take off massively. Along with Stoner, he dropped his other breakout single, Danny Glover. Stoner actually ended up going number 47 on the Billboard charts. So Thug was finally getting a shot at the legitimate music industry. But that doesn't mean that away from the charts, Thug wasn't still rapping on some blood shit. He actually collaborated with that well-known Atlanta blood who we mentioned earlier on in this story, Bloody J, on a collaborative mixtape called Black Portland. Now, this was unfortunately taken off of streaming services in 2019, but the mere fact that this project exists just goes to show you how interconnected and clicked up the various blood rappers in Atlanta were at this point in time. But at a certain point, the blood ties in the music industry would go far beyond Atlanta. At a certain point, Young Thug ended up linking with famous industry blood, big-time music mogul Birdman of Cash Money Records, with Young Thug finding himself featuring prominently on Birdman's Rich Gang collaboration project, including the lead hit single Lifestyle alongside Rich Homie Quan, a track that in my opinion goes down to this very day as probably one of the best party songs that the rap game has ever spawned. So not only does Young Thug land a spot on one of the best party records of the entire era, but he also earns numerous placements on Birdman's Rich Gang The Tour compilation album. This project also featured the bonus track Throw Your Hood Up, where Young Thug, Bloody J, and Nipsey Hussle all rep their gang affiliations heavily, with Thug and Bloody J basically writing a love letter to being a blood. Birdman's all over the track, throwing up his set and replacing C's with B's. But Birdman also says in the intro of the song that they're big bloods but they hang out with a few Crips, hence why Nipsey Hussle is also on the song, dropping lyrics that would only become relevant in court documents years later. So you've got Birdman, Young Thug, and Bloody J and a whole bunch of other blood affiliated rappers running around on tour, living the luxury lifestyle and finally making money off of music. Problem is, along with the blood affiliated musicians are a bunch of blood gang members who are better known in the streets than in the music. In fact, in a Rich Gang behind the scenes vlog, we actually see Young Thug introduce a man to the camera, describing him as one of the biggest bloods in America.
I got one of the biggest bloods in America with me, my nigga. You did. Atlanta, Georgia, nigga.
This man's name is Donovan Thomas, aka Big Nut, and he's a man who would play a major role in the come-up story of YFN Luchi. But unfortunately, his life would be suddenly cut short, sparking a bloody war in the streets that would go on for years to come. So, YFN Luchi's big brother YFN encouraged him to get into rap when he was a teenager.
My big brother, his name YFN, he been rapping since I was like 13. Inspired me, made me want to make music. I started rapping, I freestyle for my big brother.
But obviously his big brother, who was an aspiring rapper himself, wouldn't really be able to get him into the industry. But fortunately for Lucci, having ties in the streets meant he had a network of people to draw upon who might just be able to give him a head start in the rap game. In fact, one of his closest friend's older brothers was Big Nut, that same man that Young Thug had described on Birdman's yacht as one of the biggest bloods in America. And Lucci would go on to say that Big Nut heard his music and truly believed in him.
Now, you had a close friend named Nut.
Yeah, that was one of my best friend, big brothers.
Uh-huh.
And he would just believe in me, like when he used to hear my music and shit.
In fact, it was actually Big Nut himself who had introduced YFN Luchi to Fly, who had managed Rich Homie Quan and Trinidad James as part of his record label, Think It's a Game.
Yeah, he introduced me to
Take that
Fly.
shit serious.
Well, I know this person, we're gonna try to fuck with this person. But then we were fucking with somebody like, man, I don't think he know too much. I'm gonna introduce you to Fly.
Yeah, Fly had Rich Homie Quan. He also had Trinidad James.
Yeah, so Nut introduced me to them. When he introduced me to them, now they were fucking with the music.
In fact, YFN Luchi would later reveal in a DJ Smalls Eyes interview that it was Nut who introduced Luchi to Fly, saying that Luchi was the hardest rapper out and that he would listen to a strategy if Fly put one together for him.
He introduced me to Fly. He was like, man, Fly know, like, man, shout it. Hard, like ain't nobody harder than him, man. He want to do it, he love doing it, so he gonna do it and he gonna listen. And Fly, Fly, but that was his man, and he believed in him.
Clearly, Nut's word held weight in the streets and in the rap game, and purely off the strength of Nut's recommendation and his first mixtape that was completed but unreleased at this point, Fly decided to give Lucci a chance, releasing his tape Wish Me Well under Think It's a Game Records. With Lucci also getting a care pack courtesy of Fly, a feature from his label mate Rich Homie Quan, for Lucci's first single, Exactly How It Was. And so, all thanks to Big Nut, Lucci finally had an opportunity to break into the rap game fully legit. And from here, Lucci would go on to have big career W's working with Think It's a Game Entertainment. But as both YFN Luchi and Young Thug would continue to have success in the music industry, picking up thousands of fans and making millions of dollars from their songs, eventually their beef would also make its way into the music industry for the entire world to see. Because no matter how much they wanted to keep their street politics secret, eventually this beef would play out very publicly and very bitterly. In the midst of the death of Big Nut, the war between YFN and YSL was heating up in the streets. During this time, a lot of the beef in the area was kept offline, especially considering the fact that in 2015, when Nut's life was taken, both Thug and Lucci were still relatively early on in their careers. So at this point, the kind of gang-related activity going on around these two artists was subject to far less scrutiny. However, in 2016, as YFN Lucci's career begins to pick up steam and he appears in a number of on-camera interviews, he reveals just how real his life in the streets of Atlanta has truly gotten, telling Karen Civil that his family home had been the target of numerous shootings.
When my house got shot up, I was out of town though, man. I get a call, my mom don't say the house got shot. They ain't even pull up in front of the house. They pull up like right here, and they was just shooting it like, sideways behind the car in the street. They was in the street though shooting, cause that's where all the shell was.
Yes, apparently the ops were pulling up at YFN Lucci's house and straight spraying it up. But that wasn't the only time. Apparently they came back, and this time Lucci's own mother was left injured.
He ain't even really want to say it. He like the house there, he say it happened again. We hop out, we come over here. Jew was in here, my big brother Juju was in here, my baby mama, and my little girl and my mama and her friend. Both of them got shot though, my mama and her friend.
Whilst he was forthcoming to Karen Civil about the details of the shooting, when asked about who did it in a Vlad TV interview, Lucci was much less forthcoming.
You don't know who did it. Street code, right?
So at this point, the stakes in the streets of Atlanta are getting very high. And when mothers are getting hit, you know that the beef is serious. But even worse than involving mothers is involving children. And as the beef goes on, you will see that rappers on both sides of this feud aren't afraid to take it there, bringing their own ops kids into the beef just to goad their rivals. In February 2016, YFN Luchi took to Instagram to wish Young Thug's daughter a happy birthday, posting a video of her face, which I'm definitely not going to put in this video. An incredibly ominous and serious message from YFN Luchi to Young Thug. But in spite of this kind of bold message sent on social media for the whole world to see, Lucci wasn't done prodding Thug. That same month, he also took to Twitter, saying that Young Thug's fiancée Jerica misses being on the couch with Lucci. He went on to infer that Young Thug would cry if he saw the DMs between Lucci and Jerica. Lucci would go on to post the unverified but supposed messages between him and Jerica, which weren't really damning or necessarily verifiable, but at the very least, if true, they would infer that Jerica had been to visit Lucci. Anyway, Lucci attempted to back up that unverifiable screen grab with a tweet saying true story, and another saying that he's got someone's hoe on a leash, going on to infer that he stole a rich person's girl, and atting Jerica directly saying that he misses her, shooting out another tweet to suggest that her denying this is a lie. And finally, ending his tirade by tweeting out 3 L's, which I assume were aimed at Young Thug. Now, Thug eventually replied in a tweet suggesting that Lucci was just looking for clout, and another saying that if a rapper wants to come up, they should collab rather than trying to start beef. A month after this, in March 2016, Lucci does an interview with DJ Small's Eyes where he suggests that he doesn't even know who Young Thug is.
You and Thug.
I don't know him. Never heard of him.
Now, at a certain point, it would make sense for Lucci to set his pride and this beef to one side and focus on his buzzing music career. By this point, Lucci was just about getting to that next level. Since joining up with CEO Fly of Think It's a Game Entertainment, he'd gone on to drop his follow-up mixtape Wish Me Well 2, just about landing in on the Billboard charts at position 183. This would be Lucci's first real chart hit, with Lucci and Fly both pulling up for a celebratory interview on The Breakfast Club. And in this interview, Lucci had some choice words, not just for Young Thug, but also his fiancée Jerica. Doubling down on his earlier tweet shooting his shot at her, with Lucci saying he'll holler at whoever he wants.
Now, I saw you also was tweeting at Young Thug's fiance.
If that was his girl, that was his girl. You smell me?
Okay, so you didn't know, maybe.
Hey, man, we in the street, man. I met everybody.
Not long after brushing off the Young Thug drama, Lucci would go on in this interview to boldly proclaim that he is still tied in with the streets and that everybody he keeps around him now has street credentials.
We ain't got time to hang in the streets, man. We been did that.
What about your circle of people that was with you in Atlanta before everything started moving?
They still with me. YFN BC. Like, all of us, we grew up together. Blood brothers to best friends, and we were like 8. So, you know, that's really it can get.
But ironically, while Lucci is breaking into the charts for the first time, still maintaining his ties to the streets, Young Thug's career is progressing at lightning speed. Let's not forget, as Lucci was just signing his very first deals, Young Thug was running around on yachts with Birdman, living the lifestyle, and slowly putting together a string of hits. While Lucci was making baby steps, Young Thug, who had had a head start of a couple of years, was making huge strides. In mid-2014, Young Thug signed to 300 Entertainment, and in 2015, in response to a large amount of his music leaking, Thug would end up dropping a colossal amount of music. His controversial Barter 6 project released, with the album's title Barter 6, sparking a furious feud with Lil Wayne, who had named a number of his albums The Carter, with this feud ultimately culminating in Lil Wayne's tour bus being shot up by an affiliate of Young Thug and Birdman, an incident that I covered in a separate video years ago on this channel. Go check that out if you haven't. But anyway, following the huge success of Barter 6, Thug would then go on to drop 2 installments of his Slime Season mixtape series to an overwhelmingly positive response. The first of which featured the classic Young Thug single Best Friend, which itself charted at 45 on Billboard, with these moves putting Young Thug in a prime position for an enormous 2016. And whilst YFN Luchi was getting his very first Billboard successes with his Wish Me Well 2 mixtape, Young Thug was going mainstream. He landed a Calvin Klein campaign. He dropped charting singles with Travis Scott and Usher. A third installment of his Slime Season mixtape, and probably most iconic of all, was his enormous album release Jeffrey, coming along with that famous cover art where Young Thug wore a dress. Now, Jeffrey and its cross-dressing cover art stoked a lot of discussion in hip-hop about masculinity, gender, and self-image in a genre of music that's generally not known for its dress-wearing rappers. Now, Thug would later go on to try and reclaim some gangster points, suggesting that the only reason he wore a dress is so that he could hide an AK-47 under it, but the reality is, a gangster throwing a dress on the cover of their album is always going to generate a lot of attention and sales. Jeffrey was a huge success, peaking at number 8 on Billboard, and frankly bringing the discourse in hip-hop forward about 10 years. After Jeffrey, Young Thug had cemented himself as a trap rap icon, and as a result, the streams and sales were rolling in. Young Thug was one of the hottest commodities in town, and everyone was lining up to throw a bag at him. So following the successful launch of Jeffrey, Young Thug would finally be in prime position to put into action his plan of making everybody around him a millionaire. At which point he worked closely with Laya Cohen of 300 Entertainment to launch his own sub-record label, YSL. Now, to this day, it's still not definitively clear what the S in YSL stands for. Is it Young Stoner Life, Young Slime Life, Young Slapped Life? It doesn't really matter. America because Young Thug had finally and truly bossed up, escaping the blocks of Cleveland Avenue, making a whole bunch of hit records, and using his movement in the music industry to finally bring his vision for a label to life, and legitimately put on all of the friends and family who had been there with him, helping him survive from the early days in the trenches. This was an incredible achievement for Young Thug that likely inspired many more aspiring rappers to do the very same. And in the following year, YFN Luchi would try and level up too, making bigger inroads into the music industry and building himself an empire. However, unfortunately, as Luchi was growing in the music business, his past ties to the streets remained. And as he would continue to use his music to reflect on his dark past, sadly that same past would come back to haunt him.